So it's 3, 2, 1. We are live now, sir. You can start the session.
Namaskara, Ellarigo. This is the first of all the KOS Scientific Committee CMEs, eCMEs that we have arranged. I request our President, Dr. YL Rajshekar sir, to start the meeting.
Namaskara. Good evening, friends. These are tough COVID times. Again, we are back with kind of a deja vu. We're in the midst of second wave, which is affecting the entire society. And a lot of cases we are seeing in Bangalore and in Karnataka and across other parts of the country also. I wish and pray that all the people recover fast and all the ophthalmic community sails through this pandemic in a safe way. And as ophthalmologists, we have seen in the first wave also, the practice takes a beating. Well, this is a time for focus on safety. Our patients, those who require care, especially the retina patients, the glaucoma patients, and those who are having chronic illnesses and needing follow-up. Some of them we have seen in the first wave losing their sight or deteriorating post those 3 to 4 months of lack of follow-up or lack of care. I request each one of you to, in whatever way possible, either to communicate to them or to take care of them in the limited, safe way. Apart from that, our elective works will definitely wait and they'll come back. And in addition to that, I request each one of you as medical professionals to support your own family members or the near and dear ones who reach out to you, either asking for advice or some tips in care. Though we are not proficient and experts, this is a time whatever little we can do in connecting them to the actual professionals or taking care of mild cases, we can do remotely sitting at home. That's one way we can contribute during this pandemic. In addition to that, our learning continues. I thank our the Secretary, Dr. Kudlu, and our Scientific Committee Chairman, Ilan Kumaran, for thinking of it and putting up this program. This program is also one where we keep connecting with our friends, because otherwise we miss out. So this kind of lockdowns, isolations, and lack of physical movements will keep us away from our scientific meetings as well as interactions and improving our knowledge. In this way, these kind of webinars and interactive sessions will help. He has thought out this topic and all esteemed speakers are there. Without taking much time, I wish this function a great success. Over to you, Ilan. I welcome all the speakers and all the audience, and I wish it's going to be a great session. Thank you, Ilan.
Thank you, sir. Now I request our dynamic secretary, Dr. Krishna Prasad Kudlu, to give his remarks.
Thank you, Ilan. As our president, Dr. Rajshekar sir, said that we are all going through a very tough period. I think more than seeing ophthalmic patient, I think daily I spend almost 5 to 6 hours giving my time towards admitting the patient, those are really suffering from COVID in different hospital in and around country. But still, I think we have to, well, as ophthalmologist, as sir said, that we cannot do much, but we can really help our family members to go for the treatment as early as possible, and also we can motivate them for going for vaccination. But unfortunately, suddenly there is a drop in the vaccination drive. Hopefully another 7 to 10 days, I think we will be get back to the same speed what vaccination is going on before. So I think as sir said that we are going for a tough time, but in such a tough time also I should really congratulate Elan for this wonderful effort to get one scientific program for our Karnataka Ophthalmic Society members, because these kind of programs really opens your mind, also make you a little bit relaxed. You can listen to your own members, whatever all their presentations, and keep continue to do whatever the work you do. As sir said that I think we may have to wait for another 4 to 5 months till this COVID get through. So my only request to everybody, you all stay safe, be careful. Also, let us help each one to grow further ahead. And we hope that I think COVID will never hurt any of our whole medical fraternity and more of the people. Once again, I thank Elan to involve us, the whole committee member, for this scientific program. Let's hope for the coming days. Over to you, Elan.
Thank you, sir. Right from the time when we were PGs till maybe 2012 or something, if I was asked what is the treatment for myopia, the first thing that comes to my mind would have been a laser vision correction or some other such kind. Without thinking that that is not the treatment. Treatment for progression of myopia, then there was nothing. Then came certain reports that low dose atropine was helping. And then we started our experiments in the clinic, many of us. We started diluting the injection atropine that was available. And many times we used to give a concentration which was much more than which was specified. And because of this, as well as the patient has to come back to us for these preparations, there was a huge dropout. So many of us gave up that also. Somewhere in the year 2018 or 2017, it started changing with the commercially available drops. And then from then on, there was no looking back. Most of us are practicing this. But what is more important is, some of us here see prescription of an atropine eye drop for even astigmatism. There are many such examples. So here we have an excellent speaker, a great teacher to many of us in this group, Dr. Sumita Agarkar, who finished her MBBS and MD from Indore, then did her pediatric ophthalmology fellowship from Arvind, and joined Shankar Nethralaya as a consultant in 1999. And for the past 10 years, or maybe more, she has been the deputy director of pediatric ophthalmology services at Shankar Nethralaya. And she has at least 40 peer-reviewed publications to her credit. She will be talking to us and clearing our doubts about the role of low-dose atropine in progression of myopia. Madam, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and it's been a privilege to be invited by KOS for this webinar. And something which it is a very, very topical topic because of thanks to kids being at home and in front of screen. Myopia has really taken a hit in the past 1 year. So is my screen visible?
Yes, madam, it is visible.
So, okay, so we are going to talk about atropine, and the panel here is very, very eminent panel. Each of them could give this talk without preparation what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to make it a really short presentation on what we have actually found in our children in India, basically to extrapolate with India. And then we can take questions and have discussion on it. So basically, when you look at myopia control, you have to worry about what is, you have to define what exactly the children who need intervention, why we need to intervene, and what to intervene if required, and how you kind of go about it. So when you look at the definitions of myopia progression, basically you define myopia as any power which is more than or equal to 0.5 diopters, minus 0.5 diopter in one eye at least. And according to WHO, high myopia is now defined as anything above -5, or an axial length of more than 26 millimeters can be defined as a high myopia. Similarly, how do we define progression? No progression is defined as there is no myopic shift within a year or over a year. Moderate progression can be defined as -0.25 to -0.75 over a year. And things which we need to really worry about is children who are progressing at more than 0.75, what we call as a rapid progression. And these are the children probably you need to focus your energies on. So why worry about myopia in 2021? Because I think the colleagues who are on panel and who are all pediatric ophthalmologists agree with me that we are seeing increasingly early onset of myopia. Children, a decade back in my practice, I used to see very few young children, but who had myopia, and now increasingly I am seeing children under 5 or children under 3 getting myopia. Myopia progression rates are higher in younger children as reported elsewhere all over the world. And early onset is worrisome because early onset leaves them with many years where there is progression can happen. So it is a little bit worrisome when you see a 4-year-old child coming with -3. We need to worry, and probably there is a need for intervention about this. Again, it is, if you look at the world over, it is affecting as many as 85 to 90% in few Asian countries like Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong. And prevalence of myopia is almost increased by 66% in the last 2 decades. So it is nearly what we come as myopia epidemic or exploding epidemic of myopia, which is going to cause a huge socioeconomic burden across the globe. And if you monetize it, it comes to an astounding figure of $268 billion over next decade. So I think that's the reason why there are so many studies or so much of research going on myopia control. Is myopia all right? Well, there is no safe myopia. And why we worry about high myopia? Because they all have, when these children grow up, they have increasingly high risk of cataract, retinal detachment, and glaucoma, and also macular degeneration. So if you look, the risks are relatively acceptable between -3 and -1 to -3, but they become increasingly worrisome and tiresome in the range of high myopia, which is -6 to -8. So if you can stop the child from progressing from a mild to moderate myopia to high myopia, you would have done a social service. And that's the reason for so much of this. How is it in India? If you look at our projected figures here, in 2000 year, under 15, myopia was just about 5 to 6%, while as the same corresponding figure in 2015 has been 13%. So there is and if you look at this data in private schools, children or relatively affluent children, it jumps up to almost 18 to 25% as seen in our school surveys in Chennai. And if you look at globally, it is expected to rise from 34%, which is now with a high myopia of around 5.25%, to as high as nearly 50% in just next 30 years. And high myopia is also going to double from 5 to 9 to 9.85%. So what are the risk factors for myopia? Basically, genetic history. If one parent is myopic, you are 3 times more likely that child will have myopia. If both the parents are myopic, your risk becomes almost double, which is 6 times. What are the other risk factors? 3 hours or more of screen time, the risk increases by 2.5 times. And that's where 2020 has been horrendous in many other ways. If your outdoor time is less than 1.5 hours a week, again, the risk almost decreases. So what are the methods of myopia control at this point? We can either prevent or we can at least retard the progression of myopia. So when it comes to myopia, this is what we want. So what are the preventive strategies? Now, preventive strategies work to a certain extent. There is cause-effect relationship of outdoor time is not very well established. But if you look at the Australian population of children versus say East Asian population, Australian children seem to spend far more time outdoors in sun, and their myopia progression is not as bad as it is in some of the Asian countries. So total time spent outdoors is associated with less myopia. And meta-analysis does seem to suggest that protective effect of onset is for onset, but not really progression. So once they are progressing, probably outdoor has little less role to play. but you can delay the onset by encouraging outdoor activity in children. So when we use cell phones to give it to the children while they are having their lunch or dinner, or when they or just want to engage the kids for a few minutes, that's where the risk actually increases. So how does this possible mechanism is high light intensity levels outside probably stimulates dopamine release from retina, and this has somehow a protective effect on the onset, and it inhibits the axial elongation. Now that works to a certain extent, that you increase outdoor time, really reduce the screen time. But what if the myopia is already onset? As I said, everything is not really modifiable regarding myopia. If both your parents are myopic, your kid is likely to become is likely to have myopia. So in that case, what are the next best thing which we can do is to slow down the progression. So how do we do that? So if you look at it, the 4 strategies which have worked, there have been several which have been tried, but what has consistently worked is atropine drops in low dose. Orthokeratology also has shown effective decrease in progression. Bifocals and progressive addition lenses have been tried in a certain niche population. They seem to work, but by and large, they have not proved as effective as the upper 2. And of course, there is DIMS, or the diffuse, the new kid on the town, which we'll talk about it a little later, which seems to have early results, seem to be promising in retarding myopia or retarding myopia progression. So our knowledge about atropine, most of it comes from ATOM studies, both ATOM 1 and ATOM 2. And both these studies looked at effect of atropine prospectively on children and found that atropine seems to act on a dose-dependent manner, means higher the percentage of atropine, the better is the result as far as the myopia progression goes. So initially ATOM 1 looked at 1% atropine versus a placebo, and they found very effective myopia, reduced myopia progression by 77% over a period of 2 years, which is astounding result. But unfortunately, 1% atropine was also associated with increased photophobia, dropout from the patients, drops from there, and decreased near vision, because it kind of paralyzed their accommodation in near vision, and they required a photochromatic glass as well as a near addition glasses, which made the cost of glasses increasingly untenable for some populations, like say in India, where we photochromatic glass with a progressive addition for near can cost anywhere upward of 3,000 rupees. So then there was a thought that whether low dose atropine is as effective, and that's where the ATOM 2 came in, which looked at lower percentages of atropine. And subsequent trials did prove that 0.01% to be as effective or a little bit more effective than higher concentrations, which they looked at, which was 0.5 and 0.05. Another problem with Another problem which was seen with higher percentage atropine was a rebound effect, means once you stop drop, they progress far more rapidly if the percentage of atropine, higher dose percentage was of atropine, if it was used, rebound was far more significant. It was far more significant in younger children compared to older children. So that also was a problem, because whenever you stopped 1% atropine, the rebound was as bad as 1.81 diopters over a period of a year. So which was a little bit problematic. So that progression was rebound phenomena was seen much less or maybe manageable limits. Rebound was there even in 0.1, 0.01, but probably it was a little bit on the manageable limits. So this has been our experience of using a low dose atropine. So we started myopia clinic somewhere in 2017. It was a brainchild of Dr. Meenakshi and Mr. Vishwanathan, who were our optometry head. And we started it as early as 5 years back. And the way we work up these children in Shankar Netralaya is that once the children come to myopia clinic, they will have a very detailed history regarding all these points which I mentioned here, and particular history in terms of outdoor activity and screen time and near activities, and again more pointed history towards whatever has been done before. So this is what every child, once they come, we do a detailed history. And workup basically consists of 2 arms. We do a basic binocular vision assessment, and we also look at detailed ocular biometry measurements using a Argos advanced optical biometer. So if you look at basic of the vision assessment, and why we do is we look at the accommodative facility, because as I was mentioning earlier, we lack of accommodation or esophoria for near, those children seem to do better with progressive addition lenses. So it's important to note down a little bit on binocular status, or mostly the status of accommodation in these children. So we do a cover test, we do a near point of accommodation, near point of convergence. We also look at accommodative facility using flippers, and we also use open field autorefractometer to look at accommodative response when the child is looking at the near. So this is part of myopia workup, whether we are prescribing drops or not, but we do this baseline workup for every child who is myopic and who can cooperate for these tests. We also do a detailed ocular biometry measurements using Argos, which is a very, very non-invasive and a very effective and very quick tool to give you information regarding axial length, central corneal thickness, and AC depth, length thickness, and keratometry. So it gives you a detailed printout on all these children, and a little bit cooperative child also, we are able to do a very good biometry. And this is a part of not only as a baseline evaluation, but also on every follow-up. So how has been our experience with 0.01% atropine? So we enrolled children for this open trial. By the time drop was already commercially available, and it's a very difficult to give placebo when the drop is commercially available to do a randomized control trial. So we did opt for an open trial, and we enrolled around 60 subjects between 6 to 12 years of age as specified by ATOM. We followed up them for at least 1 year before starting drop, and at least a year after that, after starting the drop. Atropine was given in the dose of 0.01% once a day, and we excluded syndromic myopia and very high myopia. So if you look at our results, in the previous year before starting atropine, the eyes were progressing at the rate of 0.93 diopter over a period of 1 year, while as after atropine, it dropped to 0.41. Similarly, in the left eye, they have given the data for right eye and left eye, and both basically we showed a dramatic response to 0.01% atropine, even in children, something similar to what has been reported in ATOM2 studies. If you look at the baseline characteristics in terms of myopia or spherical equivalent, it was 4.9. And after the end of 1 year of follow-up of atropine, it was 5.49. So a progression of just about 4.5 diopters over a period of a year, which would have been 0.93 if we had not started on atropine. And we saw the similar little bit of a problem here, because axial length did increase, which did not corroborate with the myopia progression, because if myopia progression is 0.5, we should have had less axial length increase, but we did see axial length increase from 25.16 at baseline to 25.43 in right eye, and in the left eye something similar. So this was a little bit we could not find a correlation between why axial length increased more, and we did not find that much of spherical equivalent increase. But important thing to note is that there has been a dramatic reduction in myopia progression over a period of a year. What about non-responders? Similar to ATOM-2 studies, 10 children, that is around 16%, were non-responders. That is where progression was more than 0.5 despite treatment and good compliance to the therapy. We don't have a good strategy at this point to deal with non-responders, but as suggested by Dr. Odrichia, it probably non-responders would probably need a combination of either a higher strength of atropine or increasing the frequency, or a combination with other optical treatment probably will work for these children. 3 patients did report temporary stinging sensation, which did not require any discontinuation of the drop. We had no dropouts from the therapy. There was no reported difficulty in reading or in photophobia or glare reported by children or the parents. If we look at visual acuity, accommodation, and ocular surface, they remain unaffected with atropine. So this is our protocol, depending on what we saw in the past 2 years with atropine. We do start atropine once a day, and nowadays, following the trend, we don't tell them to put it at bedtime, but we ask them to put the drop in the morning because that seems to be more effective. If there is good response, means less than 0.5 diopter change in 1 year, then we continue the same regimen for at least 2 years or up to 12 years of age, as the case may be. If it continues to progress, still we continue putting the same drop for at least 2 years before dubbing them as non-responders. If they progress at a significant rate of, say, more than 1 diopter, then we increase the atropine to twice a day frequency. And if it still continues to progress, then we actually give them on higher atropine percentage for 2 to 3 times a week. This protocol is in line with what has been suggested following ATOM studies, and it has only a little bit of modification from that. And if progression continues, then we usually taper and stop. If despite increasing it to 1%, if the progression continues, then we usually recommend stopping atropine and looking at other modalities of treatment. Now, how do you convince the parents to need for therapy or need for intervention? Sometimes very difficult to convince. So this is a nice Brian Holder calculator. It's a free online resource, and it allows the parents to see how much child is going to be myopic at the end of, say, 17 years, if they do treatment and if they don't do treatment. So this is an online resource, and it is available, and you can actually predict and show it to the parents how much child is likely to benefit with therapy. So this is available, and I think we should all use it when you are talking to parents about this. Now the new kid in town, defocus incorporated multiple segments, or DIMS. These are spectacle lenses. Again, they will be introduced, and Shankar Netralaya is in talk, and we will be able to provide these spectacles in few months, if not earlier. So this is a new study which has come up with a randomized clinical trial of 2 years using a incorporated multiple segment technology, which was developed by Hoya as well as Hong Kong Polytechnic University. It basically has one clear zone in the center and a treatment zone, which produces a plus 3.5 retinal myopic defocus. So as you can see, the center part is a hexagonal part, which is clear and allows the rays to focus on the retina. And then there is a peripheral zone, which contains several multiple segments, which are evenly distributed to provide a myopic defocus. So myopic defocus acts as a driving force for stopping the prolongation or axial length elongation. So this study, which has come out from Yam et al., it enrolled 183 children, again 8 to 13 years, between myopia of 1 to 5 diopters, and they were divided into 2 groups, with one which wore DIMS and another which wore a single vision glass, and a 2-year follow-up was done, and it significantly retarded both The DIMS group showed a significant decrease in progression as well as axial length, retardation of axial length elongation. So these Mio Smart lenses, which have been introduced by Hoya and are available in Singapore and Hong Kong, will be shortly available in India, and probably it might be a good treatment strategy for non-responders in combination with atropine or in combination with or by itself in children who are not at all responding. Orthokeratology again retards myopia progression. It involves overnight contact lens wear, which is a rigid lens, and it can correct up to 6 diopters of myopia by overnight wear, and can be useful in certain groups like athletes who cannot or will not wear glasses, which allows them to see clearly next day. However, it is expensive. A pair will cost upwards of 25,000 rupees and carries a small risk of infections. And we have recently started offering orthokeratology in our hospital, and we wait the results of how much it is. We should have some results of its effect on myopia progression in a year or two. So in summary, myopia carries a risk, and much more higher risks when the myopia increases to more than 6 diopters. The earlier you start is better. Myopia control in practice can be environmental, encourage outdoor activities, reduce screen time. And if you see a younger children, then progression is faster. Binocular vision must be tested, and you should definitely red flag any lag of accommodation or esophoria for near, and probably put those children on earlier on multifocal or a progressive addition lens. There is an opportunity to differentiate between syndromic myopia. What we don't know about myopia atropine is how does it work. The mechanism of action is not clear. We still don't have a unified strategy to deal with non-responders. Although now it is becoming clearer that probably younger children, you need a higher percentage of atropine if child is still progressing. And definitely there is a room in the market for higher percentage atropine like 0.2 or 0.05, so that there you have an option of a commercial preparation should the need arise. We didn't do anything in our study for non-responders because there is no commercial preparation available except 1% atropine straight. So the children who were enrolled in study did not receive any. If they were non-responders, they were dubbed as non-responders, and that's it. We also don't know long-term effects of atropine on accommodation and all when these children grow up and are older. We don't know that yet. But carry home, yes, 0.01% atropine is effective in Indian children, and this has been proved by another study which is multicentric and enrolled children from all over India, which was a prospective trial done by Dr. Rohit Saxena and the co-authors, and they have also reported 53% reduction with 0.01%. So one thing we at least can conclude that it does work in Indian children, and there is no racial difference between Chinese children, which it was originally studied on, and our children. But what is a little bit disturbing is that often it is indiscriminately prescribed for every child without noting progression. Often the first prescription of glass comes with a prescription of atropine, and I think that is not something which should be encouraged. And it's a good idea to document progression, to document axial length changes and refractive changes before you start atropine drops. Thank you very much for the attention. These are the references if somebody wants to look at. These are some important articles which have been published on these. And
thanks a lot, madam, for that excellent talk. Now we will have a short panel discussion. I request you also to join that. I request Dr. Soumya, the moderator for this panel discussions. She's from Shankar Nethralaya. The other panelists are Dr. Arun Samprati from Bangalore and He's the scientific committee chairman of Bangalore Ophthalmic Society also, my co-organizer here. Dr. Basavaraj Kadiwal, a scientific committee member of Karnataka Ophthalmic Society. Dr. Chinmayi, again from Bangalore, from Minto Regional Institute of Ophthalmology and Bangalore Medical College. Dr. Deepti Joshi from Hubli, MM Joshi Eye Hospital. Dr. Shilpa Rao and Dr. Sumita, Shilpa Rao from Udupi and Dr. Sumita Muthu from Narayanadri, Bangalore. Dr. Soumya, please go ahead. Meanwhile, there are a few questions we have already got. In between, I'll keep asking those questions. You can start, Dr. Soumya.
You have to unmute yourself, Dr. Soumya.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody. It feels great to be moderating a session where your mentor is the chief guest and has given such a wonderful, crisp, and a very useful insight into the use of atropine in myopia. Thank you, ma'am. So as we started off with the onset of the COVID and the online screens being the norm, we are seeing a lot of kids coming with a progression, which we didn't see it earlier. And there has been a lot of changes which has happened in the last 1 year with respect to how we see them in our clinic. So we start off with our discussion with the present, the most important question in all our minds. Has everybody noticed a change in the percentage of refractive errors that you have seen in your clinic? And is there been any change with respect to how you were seeing a progression compared to earlier? I mean, pre-COVID and post-COVID, as we call it as. So we start off with the SAR ma'am first.
I think myopia progression has increased, but I don't see that much of dramatic change to it. I was expecting the worst, and that has really not that happened. Yes, almost everyone who has come to me in last 6 months has had a progression. But whether it is because they are coming after almost 1.5 years is the reason, or is it because of excessive online activity which is there? But I have, much to the rejoice of parents, I have always told them that myopia has increased, so you reduce recreational time. And honestly speaking, lot of lower middle class children who come to me, that cell phone is their only internet connected device, unfortunately. And it is very difficult to tell them to stop education and get themselves a laptop or a desktop. It is just not possible, especially if there are more children in house. One of them is going to use a cell phone, if not both. So it's a no-win situation, and it is probably an extraordinary time in our lives, and we probably, hopefully, will never see it again. And myopia is probably least of the issues at this point, but yes, myopia progression has been really clearly linked to the time which is spent on indoors and on screens. If you look at the data, where it has gone from 5% in 2000 to 15% in 2015, what has changed so much? Our genetics has not changed. That's not changed. Only thing which has changed is really high penetration of devices. Our socioeconomic status has not changed. Our educational status has not so dramatically changed. The other risk factors for myopia, that high socioeconomic. But yes, cell phone penetration has definitely gone up. Smartphone, so there is clear link, even though no clear cause-effect relationship, but there is a link. And we probably are in the early part of COVID yet. We have to see next year how the progression is, and probably you will see the effects next year, not really this year.
Yes. Dr. Arun, would you want to comment on same?
Yeah, same thing as Dr. Sumita was telling. In fact, what I've noticed, as she said, the smaller the screen, the more is the strain. Because mobile, we typically tend to hold it very close to our eyes compared to a laptop and compared to a desktop, which is little further away. In fact, I have been suggesting, like, wherever possible, if they can, nowadays most of the smart TVs, most of the homes have smart TVs. So if they can project whatever is there on the mobile onto the television and then see through the television, that definitely I think will reduce the amount of ciliary muscle spasm which is involved in near vision activities. So I've always been recommending that bigger screen is better than smaller screen, and further away from the eye, better it is for the eyes.
I think that the problem here is not the cell phone. Actually, it's the distance.
Yes, distance, correct.
Deepti would want to comment on it. Have you also been seeing a lot of kids coming with progression in the recent past?
Progression, yes, I think there are few kids who have come with progression, but I think more than that, I've seen actually new onset myopias, which are more in the OPD as of now. I think even now when we are open, there are nearly 8 to 10 kids who are coming daily despite the whole curfew and lockdown, of which 4 kids are basically refractive error. That is the newer onset thing. That was not very common before. More used to be allergic conjunctivitis, but considering that the refractive error, the new onset myopias have increased. And among the kids, it's been, as Sumita ma'am said, it's just 1 year. To comment on progression, we really need to see those really a change in the number over a period of 1.5 years. So yes, definitely an increase in the numbers in majority of the kids have been there. But as sir said, whenever I tell them the mobile is the cause, parents tell online classes. So that is the first thing. They are not understanding that other than the online classes, the rest of the time, if the child keeps the mobile away, I think it can affect their the progression part in a lot aspect.
I think Basuraj also can comment. Coming from a smaller town, has there been a little difference compared to all of us practicing here? Is there any difference specifically with respect to the kids come that you cater to?
Yeah, good evening, madam. Yeah, Soumya, definitely, even though I practice in a small place, not district, like a rural area like Bagalkot, and I do visit every Saturday in Hungun, which is my native place. It's a taluk. Compared to last year's practice, in last 5 years, I'm going to Hungun every week, and I do practice in Bagalkot also. Definitely, there is a new increase in the new cases compared to the last years or last 4-5 years. And definitely, they are coming with not 1.5 minus 1 prism depth as a myope. They're directly coming with a -2 myopia. And if I ask, like, what was your experience with the previous, like, we are seeing the blackboard, that this thing, they say, sir, previously last year I was seeing everything is okay, but this year, because of mobile or because of online classes, definitely they're having. But actually, in fact, what madam was telling is, madam has seen last year progression of the myopia was definitely more. But I want to ask question to the SR madam. Madam, what was your experience in the last 3, 4, 5 months with respect to the new cases? Have you seen sudden surge in the new cases or just a progression of the myopia?
Yeah, new cases have increased, and definitely younger children. I think the children who are between age of 3 and 6.
Yes, madam.
Has been, and who are presenting with not like 0.5 as you said earlier. It's not really low myopia, it's high myopia. Or to start with, so a child who is at 4 minus 3 is going to progress for next 10 years.
Exactly.
So we have, but one thing I would just make a point here. I think I missed it in my presentation. The importance of doing a cycloplegic refraction. I think you should, younger children, you should never give a prescription of a small low myopia based on without doing the cycloplegic refraction. It is dangerous to wait in the clinic for 2 hours, but I think you should not compromise on that. So that is my request to all the general practitioners who see children in the clinic and use autorefractometers. You can use autorefractometers, but please use it after cycloplegic drops. No issues with that, but do not give 0.5, 0.75 in a 4-year-old child.
Unfortunately, we have been seeing 0.5 glasses with atropine drops.
Yes. Yes, you can. Yeah, as I said, yes, autorefractometers, sometimes you have to use it, and you may not have optometrists who are trained in looking at very young children. And I'm not judging it on that, but I'm just requesting to at least ensure cycloplegia before you give the glasses.
Dan, just to add on to what was discussed, I was just about to tell the same. So the number of cases that we are seeing with accommodative X's or coming with pseudomyopia has actually increase, apart from the ones which have newly diagnosed with myopia, the myopia progression. Interestingly, I've also noticed what in our clinic or in our hospital is basically that the kids who are actually not progressing the year before and they're all stable and were just on 6 monthly follow-up suddenly come now with a huge jump and the parents are like in a panic mode. It was not progressing and suddenly they see a surge, and we are also clueless about has it actually contributed to it, because the parents were not myopic and there was no risk factor involved except for the online screen. That's another set of children that we are seeing that didn't progress earlier. Now we are seeing a progression.
Dr. Soumya, one more thing I would like to ask Dr. Sumita. I have been seeing many patients with sudden onset esotropia in the last 1 year. Have you seen any increase in the number of esotropias?
I actually thought the same. So we actually took out the data from 2018 and 2021 numbers were same. Okay. So I think probably not that much change. Maybe the awareness is more, so they are coming a little bit more. But we actually did not see a great change, or maybe we were more attuned to it. So we were looking and like feeling, I anecdotally did think, okay, I'm seeing so many cases this year. But actually when we took out our numbers from our department from 2018, we saw 43 children with acute accommodative esotropia in 2018. And this year also it's been around 50 only. So no.
Anybody else?
Objectively no, but children have come. And a lot of them were concentrated actually in the 6 months when we were working in between, from say April to September, October to March. So probably that's why it looks as if you saw far more than what you saw last year. Is what I would think, because we saw them all in one spot, big, because we were not working for.
Soumya, I had one doubt. Actually, some patients, attenders came for some other reason. And when we checked on the patient, their powers had actually increased. And since they no longer go to school, they don't have to see that 6 meter distance. They're all looking at near screens. Even though their powers have progressed, they're not seeking treatment. So that's another thing which I felt. So randomly when we checked, it was a jump. But the children actually didn't feel much of a change because they're only at 1 meter distance, be it a laptop or mobile or whatever. That was another thing.
They have not been complaining as much as they would have complained if they had gone to school.
Yeah. If they had gone to school, they would have complained more because they should have sat at a 6 meter distance. But now their entire room is just very smaller compared to their classroom. That's another thing. So we may be actually seeing a lot of underreporting since they are not seeking treatment either for fear of COVID or they're just not having the complaint.
So we move the...
Can we take one audience question now?
Yes, sir. I was about to tell.
Dr.
Yes,
Akila has asked this. First question I'll ask Madam, Dr. Sumita Madam. The question is for you. There are two similar questions, so I'll ask one by one. What is the upper age limit for starting 0.01% atropine in patients with progressive myopia in practice? Practice or otherwise, I think it's the same. Second question is myopia progression prevention, that is by Dr. Anupama Shettigar, can be done till what age? Almost similar. Can you please take this, madam?
See, if you look at the evidence-based, and evidence means prospective study, it included only up to children from 6 to 12 years. So, but that should not deny you treatment, because we all know that myopia can progress beyond 12 also. Yes, maximum progression probably happens between 6 to say 13 or 14, but there are children who continue to progress. And I don't think we should deny, and there should not be any upper limit, but usually, technically in the books, probably 15 to 16 is considered as upper limit. And really very, very few children progress in really dramatic fashion after 15 or 16. So I would still offer this 0.01% atropine to up to 15 years of age. Second question, which was there, myopia progression can be done. Again, probably as long as they are progressing, you can continue treatment. Yes, study, if you look at evidence purely, they looked at only children up to 12 and they recommend to start continue treatment till 12 years of age. But practical thing is we see children progressing even after 12. In fact, a lot of our children do not present at 6. They all present at little later. So either because we are, and they looked at the younger children probably because their country has so much high myopia. The lot of children have both parents myopic. So they had to enroll children who were little younger. In fact, ATOM-3, which is the another part of the study, is actually looking at pre-myopes. Pre-myopes means children who are less hyperopic for their age. They are planning to put them on atropine drops even before they become myopic to see if it really works to prevent it. But in our scenario, oftentimes myopic children do not present at the age of 4 or 5. They often come a little later. So progression is also a little later. So I think you can continue as long as you can see a progression and document a progression, you should continue the treatment. And you should also encourage in every other way to do other lifestyle modifications also to encourage children.
From the same.
And you have to remember this, atropine doesn't stop progression. It slows it down. It retards it. So if your progression is 0.25, don't need to start atropine. Every child does not need atropine because you're not going to be able to stop it completely. So your progression has to be more than 0.5 diopter over a period of 6 months before the child qualifies for atropine. Just because child is progressing, you don't put them on atropine. Don't put atropine in children who have only astigmatism. I have seen minus 3.5 cylinder with atropine. Why? That's not the indication. Every glass prescription cannot be with the atropine. Similarly, syndromic myopia, we don't know the effect of myopia. Children who are ROP related myopia, we don't know whether atropine really works in those children. And a lot of these children who have ROP often present with minus 10, but they don't progress. So they don't need atropine. So I think it's important to select the patients who will benefit from the treatment rather than because the drop is available commercially, let me put it for everybody. I think that should not be the shotgun approach should not be there.
So taking the lead from the same question, is there any lower limit that the panelists think that before a cutoff before you start on low dose atropine? Probably Dr. Shilpa, Dr. Sumita, and Dr. Chinmay could answer this. Any lower limit that you consider before you start off? Let's start off with Dr. Sumita. Sumita Muthu.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was seeing that you're asking, ma'am. Okay, so the lower limit, as you see from the studies, is of course 6 years. But I definitely don't stop myself from prescribing atropine when I see a child who's really progressing fast. And so say about 4.5, 5 years is the earliest that I have started, because we don't know the side effect profile in children who are younger. But I don't see a huge difference between the basic physical makeup or the way the eye structure is in a child who's say 4 years or 6 years. So the question is, what would happen if you start on a younger child? And I think I don't know the answer to that, but I definitely start if the child is about 4 years or older.
Okay. Dr. Shilpa?
Ma'am, the youngest we have started in has been about 6 years of age, ma'am. We also but we have to record the progression. That is, like, we do not, even in a very young child, if it is there, we record the progression. Like if it is, definitely we can record the progression, then we start on atropine 0.01% drops, ma'am. And also sometimes we take family history and history of myopia in the siblings and also into account. But even in those cases, we have always recorded the progression and then started on the drops. 6 has been the youngest.
6 has been the youngest. How about you, Chinmay?
Yeah, 6 is the youngest. Just in about 2 patients I have given in 5-year-old patient when there was a strong family history in the parent. So otherwise, it's generally 6.
Okay, I think SAR ma'am would want to comment something on the lower age.
I think you can start. If both the parents are myopic, you definitely document progression. There is no syndromic thing. There is no anterior segment anomaly. Child has no other ocular comorbidities or any other anterior segment syndrome. I think no harm in giving it to as young as 4-year-old. I think I have not put anybody that young yet, but I would not hesitate if I see that if it's only axial myopia and he is progressing, document progression both by spherical equivalent as well as axial length. Should not be a problem.
I think LAMP study also enrolled children between 4 and 12. So that their age limit is a little lesser. So probably we are safer in looking at 4 as the cutoff.
In fact, the LAMP study actually recommends in younger children to starting at 0.02, sorry.
0.02.
Yeah. So younger the children, you need a little bit probably a higher strength or a higher frequency to be really
progression is 0.5 and 6 months for you, and SM?
Yeah, 0.5 over a period of 6, more than
6
0.5.
months. Does all the panelists also agree using the same norm, or has it been a little different? I think it's 0.5 and 6 months is our cutoff compared to the studies where they've taken it as 0.5 over a year or a little more than that. I think we move on with the questions again. With the onset of LAMP studies being published in 2020, which is almost a year now, saying 0.05% was much better than a 0.01 in terms of both reducing the spherical equivalent and showing a dose-dependent response with 0.01. Has any of the panelists changed their practice, switched over to 0.05 or 0.025, though it's not commercially available, started making it on your own, diluting it, and started it off? Dr. Arun sir?
Oh, no, I have not started because see, even before this 0.01 was available, I used to dilute it and give it in the patients using 1% atropine drops. And so that used to be very cumbersome. So every month the patient has to come to the clinic and we have to make it and give it. So it was very cumbersome. And in fact, before that, I used to use 0.1%. Before this ATOM2 study, I even tried 0.1%. But then actually, I wanted to ask Sumita madam, because she mentioned in the studies the non-responders, she has used even 1% atropine. But these people have very severe near vision difficulties and we have to give progressive glasses. Otherwise, their life will be very frustrating. So they will just not accept it. Even 0.1% have a lot of rejections, like patients just don't continue using it. They just say this drops is useless and I'm better off without it. So 0.01 has definitely made life much easier for all of us. And since it's commercially available, the compliance also is much better. Otherwise, they'll come first 2 or 3 months, then they forget about it, and the compliance becomes very poor if you start making your own dilutions.
There's one question being asked with regards to the 0.01% that you mentioned, that you use it in the morning instead of the bedtime. And what exactly drives you to do that? It's one of the questions from the audience.
I don't know.
Is asking.
I don't know, honestly. But I heard it from Dr. Chia's, Dr. Audrey Chia's lecture, and she says it's more effective. I really haven't asked.
I think that's more to do with the compliance. Like just putting before going to bed, the compliance is much better than putting going to the school.
I don't know, but if there is a more scientific explanation than that, I have to find out.
There's actually one article by Kothari, Mihir Kothari sir, where he says that the peak effect of atropine actually, that the mydriatic effect is by 1 hour and the cycloplegic effect peaks by about 3 hours. So having a peak effect coincide with their peak activity, and that is what retards and is more effective in retardation. That's what is the only explanation given available anywhere. So
sounds quite scientific. Like
I
everything.
don't think so. 0.01%, we are talking of a cycloplegic effect,
Cycloplegic
a
effect.
pediatric
True.
effect in any scenario.
True.
So looking at the pupillary responses, what
There
atom
is-
1 or atom 2 or LAMP study tells us, there's hardly any change. And that's exactly how we are explaining the near vision being wonderful with 0.01%. Has anyone noticed, like I've had 3 children specifically come back with 0.01% atropine, having near vision difficulty just before their exams, where I've started them much before, but they were all okay. Just before their exams, say a week or 2 weeks before, they give a frantic call telling that they're not able to read for the exams. In fact, I had called 2 of them back to the clinic, did all the basic orthoptic evaluation, compared it with the preliminary baseline, no much of a change, except for the accommodative facility, which was a little off. The parents were like really in a panic mode, and the child was like, I was not able to read for the exam. So I had to stop it during the course of exams and then restart it again. 2 of them came back with the same complaints with the next exams also. So has anyone had similar experience?
I have a feeling that you have probably mildly disabled their accommodation, very mildly. But because of the exam stress and all, they are trying to overcome that. And it's kind of a accommodative spasm, which leads to this blurring because of the excessive accommodative use which they are doing at that time. That's only explanation I can think of. That you have, it is like a mild accommodative weakness which is drug induced in this case, and they are compensating it by over accommodating. And
the first child was when I was diluting and giving the atropine. The same child came back with a commercial preparation also with the same complaints. Then she settled down after the third exam. So there were like 3 children, but kind of which has not been reported.
I've had
Yes,
actually
sir.
a couple of children
so if there is
who
a
were
accommodative spasm at that time, then you should see a little bit of scissoring reflex or a little bit of accommodation, spasm of accommodation like thing. Nothing was there. Or
Nothing, ma'am, nothing.
Of course,
We did the entire orthoptic evaluation. I did everything.
Diagnosis of
NPC.
is always functional complement. There could be a
No,
functional
the children have been like really, I mean, they've been following up with us like, the last 4 or 5 years. We know that they have been like, never had an episode like that. And then eventually they settled down.
I have had a couple of patients whom I had to discontinue 0.01 also. They were like, I think it depends on the personality type, like this perfectionist attitude and that type of children. At least 2 children I know, like they didn't tolerate 0.01 also. So I had to discontinue all sorts of treatment and just continue with the glasses.
Has anyone else in the panel had a problem with?
I have also come across a similar situation as what Dr. Arun was quoting. I had to discontinue one patient who was on 0.01%. And we actually, I wanted to comment on the 0.05% also that you were talking about. 2 years ago, we did start a study before the atropine was commercially available. We wanted to compare 0.01 and 0.05. So we did not complete the study because we lost most of the children to follow up. But among the few patients that we did follow up, we found that even 0.05 did cause more pupillary dilatation, and they had more difficulties with near vision activities. Definitely more than the ones we saw in 0.01%. The 0.01% so far I have come across only one child.
Okay.
Dr.
Any experience? Yes, sir.
There was one thing, even I was thinking about it, but I received that on WhatsApp. I don't know how far, I remember reading something like this. 0.05% has better effect, but if stopped, has more chance of recurrence also. I think this was there in one of the first studies which came out.
That is 0.5, not 0.
Oh, sorry,
0.5.
So the LAMP study, which is actually looking at 0.05 and 0.025 and 0.01 patients, they published just the 2-year results. The washout period for the rebound effect is in the 3rd year. I think the study is in progress and we don't have the results if 0.05% actually has a rebound effect. I think ma'am would agree that, and sir would agree that this is what we know as of now. 0.05 and 0.025, 0.01, 2 years has shown good results with 0.05. The washout or the recurrence of it, the rebound effect with that, we'll have to wait for the results for
Yeah,
us
but
to
rebound
understand
is
about it.
usually in the previous studies, rebound was also dose dependent. Higher the percentage, the rebound was more. So I wouldn't be surprised if it is so that it is rebound is a little bit more with 0.05 rather than with 0.01. But again, I have a feeling a lot of children in LAMP study were younger, especially those with higher percentages who probably did not have that much of schoolwork and all that. That's why they had a good compliance with the 0.05%. But I would agree with Arun that a lot of older children may have some difficulties with 0.05 uh, compared to 0.01. So I think anybody who is above 6 and 7 probably need to give 0.01 only, because the schoolwork in India can be quite extensive, especially the writing work and reading work and major homework. 0.05, if you disable their accommodation for near, the compliance is going to be an issue with 0.01, 0.05. But I think there is a market for younger children with slightly higher percentages. I think companies should look at bringing a commercial product in that range, 0.05 or 0.2.
There are a couple of other two more questions which we can take them in between. Dr. Prajina has asked, how long can we use atropine for myopia? I think we have already answered this question. So Madam has answered very well. So long as there is progression, please continue using it. The next question is, why should the atropine eye drops be instilled in the morning and not at bedtime? What is the basis? Yeah.
I think we took it up, sir.
We took it up.
We took it up. We move on to the next question. I think Dr. Sandra is asking us, how does peripheral defocus retard the progression of myopia? As earlier thought used to be that blur causes the progression. In that light would avoid glasses for near work and low moderate myopia, retard the progression. Dr. Arun would want to answer this.
Sorry, I don't have
So
much.
how does the peripheral defocus retard the progression
No,
of myopia?
I think Dr. Sumita will be the best person to answer on this.
SAR, ma'am?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question 1 minute? I was not paying attention.
Sure. How does peripheral, Dr. Sandra is asking, how does peripheral defocus retard the progression of myopia? As earlier it was thought that it's the blur which causes the progression.
Yes, but what the theory is that if you have a central rays which are focused on the retina and you produce them slightly on the hyperopic focus in the mid periphery, because if you look at the pathophysiology of myopia or axial elongation, it is the mid peripheral retina which is the driving force behind elongation. So if sometimes when there is rays are not really getting focused on retina directly or behind the retina, the eye elongates to make sure that the rays are falling on the retina. So if you slightly leave them hyperopic defocus in the mid periphery by producing a segment or adding a peripheral defocused contact lens, you are making them relatively hyperopic in mid periphery so that elongation does not happen. That's the theory. And yeah, that's how I understood it. That's probably how it works. There is a really complicated theory where they say afferent thing means the elongation is driven by mid periphery, but the efferent arm, how the elongation actually happens, is not very well understood. And that's why the whole how atropine works to stop the elongation, nobody knows. Whether it is through dopamine, is it through a scleral receptors, or is it through a dopaminergic receptors in the choroid or in the sclera? We are not so sure about that. But if you leave the peripheral rays slightly, relatively hyperopic compared to the thing, it prevents the elongation of eye. I'm talking about DIMS, the Neo Smart lenses. And that was the whole principle of getting those peripheral defocus contact lenses also. they didn't work so well for myopia progression. But the whole principle was that you have a central zone which focuses on the nodal point and a peripheral defocus to drive to not to have that driving force to elongate from mid peripheral.
Perfect. I mean, I think that answers that question. Ma'am, is that okay that I share the screen to explain the same principle as what you said
Yes,
with
please.
respect to a picture?
Yes, please go ahead.
Just give me a minute.
But I think Neospot lenses will work because they are around 2,500 or 3,000 rupees is what is going to be suggested, and probably will work.
Ma'am, meanwhile, I have a doubt with respect to this. Have you used atropine in pseudophakics with progressive myopia post-cataract surgery?
No, not yet, but I have been thinking about it, honestly.
Like,
and I think there is some Jitendra had presented.
Yes,
some
exactly.
And he says it works. And the only problem with it is that a lot of times anecdotally everything looks it works. I think you need a trial for that. And there are a lot of confoundings with pseudophakia.
True.
So it has to be no glaucoma, axial length measurements to be done, and yes, but we are looking at maybe an open trial, not really a randomized trial, but open trial for maybe a small population of kids who continue to increase myopia to see if atropine works.
Screen is visible now.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
This is a presentation that we had made just to look at how the lenses were. This is the basic principle of it, where as SAR ma'am was telling, peripheral light focus is behind the retina when you give a full correction, considering that the retina is like a spheric sphere. So whatever correction that you give, it's actually causing a peripheral defocus, and you're trying to simulate the same thing. These are the hypotheses where these disc lenses actually work. One is that based on the accommodative lag or the dysfunction that it caters to, especially in children where there is esophoria. The second part of it is the hyperopic defocus, which is actually the cause for the eye to grow. So you are trying to overcome this by giving a plus 2.5 to plus 3.5 diopter addition, either in terms of a DIMS lenses or a disc contact lenses or a progressive addition lenses. Probably the newer lenses, what ma'am was mentioning about DIMS lenses, corrects this hyperopic defocus much better than a progressive addition lenses, where it is only fixed again for two different lenses. Unlike these lenslets which are there in disc lenses cater to this defocus, as what the study mentions. The two other possibility is the global retinal image quality, which can be affected, or the contrast on the retina, which again is the cause for the eye to grow. So basically all those optical principles or the lenses work on these measures. This is one of the interesting slide that I picked up from somewhere. So I thought this would explain it much simplified what SAR ma'am was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think this does make it look very, more easy. I should have put that slide. Actually, I had that slide from Hoya itself. I missed putting that slide.
No, because the question was there. That's why I thought that would be.
No. I had that slide. I downloaded it. I think I forgot to put it.
I think all of us agree that with progression that we are starting on atropine, and we continue until the progression continues. So what about the follow-up? How early, how late that you follow them up? Dr. Sumita, Deepthi, and Chinmay could take this up, and probably Basil Raj also. what is your frequency of follow-up in the children that you've started on low-dose? Dr. Deepti?
Once I start them on low-dose atropine, I usually call them initially once in 3 months. They have to come, even if it's a normal child, I call them once in 6 months. So after 3 months, I usually, first visit is usually so that if they're having any side effects, are they tolerating it well? And I cannot comment much on progression during that time, but I check their near vision. I check the distant vision, how is it with the glasses. I don't do much changes during that first third month visit. It's basically to just see the compliance of the drops of the child. But a repeat cycloplegic refraction, I usually do 6 months following the starting of the drop. So I don't know, I have to ask the others, but this is what I follow. So follow-up will be 3 monthly, but then 6 monthly is the cycloplegic refraction, what I usually do.
Pretty much same, Soumya, whatever Deepti has told in the first third month visit, mainly for compliance and other things. And of course, the cycloplegic refraction at the 6th month, that's what even I follow.
Okay. Basivaraj, I think.
I think I will follow up after 6 months. Basically, I got very less patients as of now. No, after madam's talk, I think I have to restart starting using atropine. I think I call after 6 months.
Dr. Sumita Muthu.
Monthly, so pretty much the same protocol. Yeah, only those who can afford a follow-up less than 6 months, I call maybe in 3 months to look at compliance. But the refraction, as Deepti said, is every 6 months.
Every 6 months. Just to add on, every 6 months do you do a cycloplegic refraction if there is no change in the number, or if there is only a change in the number? You see the refractive error pretty stable, you still advocate a cycloplegic refraction at the end of 6 months?
Yes. So yeah, that's a very good question, because what sometimes I notice is, say in a very busy OPD, we don't know how many times they instill the cyclopentolate and whether they waited long enough to actually get a good reading. So always repeating it helps confirm the refraction for yourself also. And there have been 1 or 2 occasions where I have seen that I probably overcorrected the previous time because the child was accommodating, maybe had an exam. So yeah, the cycloplegic refraction goes without saying. Every 6 months, we definitely do it.
Even if not for the refraction, even if not for the refraction, at least for the fundus examination, we have to dilate. Yes. So I think as well we use the cyclopentolate. Yes. And one more question I wanted to ask: have you been any of the panelists seeing increase in the number of children having cyclopentolate hallucinosis of late? Particularly this drop, I have been using one drop from, I don't know the name of the company, one particular company drop. In that, I have been seeing many children who develop cyclopent hallucinosis. In the last 1 year, I have seen this.
I have also seen an increase compared to the previous years. So there has been an increase.
I don't know whether we are just lucky or it is the brand that we use. We have not had any center.
No, because see, last 20 years also I hardly used to see this, but last 1 year there is a sudden increase, probably related to the particular brand, I think.
Actually, after giving advice to the people who put the drops, so now more people are educated about the psychosis, but I'm actually seeing an increase in the psychosis. That was very surprising.
I think there was one question from Manjunath asking about photophobia and accommodation problem with atropine. I think none of us have had that kind of a problem with low-dose atropine per se. Has anybody started using a combination therapy per se, atropine with a progressive addition lenses, unless the patient had a near vision difficulty or a contact lenses or other modalities of treatment?
I have sometimes given a progressive addition lens for children who were esophoric for near. And had, if you use MEM method to, if the lag of accommodation is more than 0.75, plus 0.75, and there is the esophoria for near, I think that small niche group of patients do well with either a bifocal or a progressive addition lens. So that's the only thing I have tried in combination with atropine sometimes. Not that many patients to say with confidence, but if you, maybe between all of us, there will be probably 5-6 patients who fit into that group. Again, very small to analyze the data really, but yeah. But in those patients, in fact, instead of atropine, you can just add bifocal glass and see if it really stops before you start atropine.
I totally agree that atropine is one of the game changer for us in dealing with progressive myopia. Apart from that, there are a lot of things as pediatric ophthalmologists that we suggest the children or the parents to do and not to do. Probably one specific suggestion from every panel is that you definitely give to the child with a progressive myopia or ask the parents to do this for sure, which will also contribute to retarding progression. Probably we start with Dr. Arun.
One thing is increase in the outdoor activities. At least 2 hours a day of outdoor activities. Of course, not in the COVID period, but otherwise in the general period, I think increase in the outdoor activities, outdoor games definitely makes a difference.
Dr. Sumita Muthu.
So one thing is now because of the online classes and everything, like what Arun sir suggested, that he tells them to project it on TV. So some of my patients have taken it to the next level and even used a bigger screen and used an actual projector to project the classes. So yeah, so that so they basically I tell them about the distance. So depending on the device, I tell them at least about 18 to 20 inches distance compared to say 14, 16 inches distance that we use for reading. If they're using tabs or other like mobile, and if it's laptop, even further. So depending on the device, I tell them you have to increase the distance to view. That's a compulsory thing right now.
I think Dr. Sumita, I have done it for my daughter, projector.
Oh, great.
Yeah, with it.
She's okay. She's comfortable with that.
Yeah, because usually there is another window open which cannot be projected there. In your personal device, it's not the class, it is another.
Another thing is to take, instead of copying from the mobile, like particularly for my daughter also, to take printouts and read it on print media rather than read it on electronic media, so that the light stimulation is also decreased. And somewhere very long back, I had read that like in a very young baby, the light stimulates the eyeball growth. So whether it will help or not, but so many people have the habit of putting on the light and sleeping. So that's another thing that I suggest them to cut the light onto the, like in the growing the eyes, the amount of light getting stimulated.
Dr. Deepti.
I think pretty much a combination of everything. I tell 3 points to all my kids, irrespective of whatever it is. Outdoor activities now with COVID, even though it is less inside your own compound, let them out. I think sunlight exposure is equally important. Number 2, other than if it is a school-going child, other than the online classes, the rest of the time no mobile. If it is a younger child, other than your lunchtime, the rest of the no mobile. It's in the current era, practically thinking, totally taking out of the mobile is very difficult. I myself give my second one a mobile when I'm feeding her because I am tired. I want her to eat off within 15 minutes. So logically speaking, taking off the mobile completely is impossible. But the rest of the time, whenever you can, take it out. And the third most important thing, stay with your child as much as possible. You just, as ma'am said, everyone says that taking a printout is tough and she has to copy it down. You sit beside your child, you read out the question, let her write it. So at least you are spending some quality time with them. Now that the patient load is less, I think everybody, workload is less for others also, they can afford to do this. So these 3, in the same speed what I told now, the same speed I tell to the parents also, because it's more or less biated now. I don't know how much goes inside their conscience, but then I think this is what I'm putting into my personal practice. So I'm trying to tell the same thing.
In fact, Dr. Deepti, I always advise all my patients, never link the mobile time to the feeding. Because I think that's how the addiction starts. So
sir, it's easy
just
to say,
de-link.
but then
no, because I think that's where the addiction starts. Like as children as young as 1 year,
correct.
Parents start putting the rhymes and then start feeding the child, and then the child becomes addicted to the
There are both positive and negative. My second one is more sharper than my first one. She knows lot of things more earlier than what my first used to know. Maybe that is the mobile thing, but then there is negative thing. Every 1 monthly once I do her refraction, I said the only doing a cycloplegic refraction is the only thing pending. Otherwise, I keep on doing her retinoscopy with the fear that what if she turns out to be myopic. So both pluses and minuses are there. But as I said, I myself am at a fault when I can give mobile despite knowing so many things. So I think it's difficult to expect from a parent that total 24 hours off mobile. So restrict to as much extent as possible is what practical advice I usually give them.
Is there anything else to add to?
No, I think everybody has said whatever needed to be said. But just Dipti, for your thing, mobile use is also linked to obesity and attention deficit. So
both are thin.
I was about to tell that.
Become obese now.
Hyperactivity is also evidence points that there is some connection with mobile screen time.
I'll keep it in mind.
Just the last thing, the last 1 year, there were
Maybe
two kids who will come with.
I think nobody covered it, so I'm going to say that every 20 minutes of screen time, 20-second break after every 20 minutes, and look at something 20 meters away. This is
only other.
And 20 blinks in a minute, madam. 420.
20 blinks in a minute. Yeah, I didn't think of that, but that also sounds good.
The only other thing probably I'm adding on to what has been told as a part of advice now, since everybody stays in the room and invariably online classes means that they would be given a private room where they're sitting and they don't actually come out apart from the outdoor activity. I actually ask them the time that they are not required to be in front of the classroom. So they sit outside to do their part of reading, any kind of reading that they do, any extra thing that they do. They have a print material in hand, sit in a balcony and read, which will prompt them probably to take a break from the book and look at something far away rather than just look at the walls of the room. So that's an additional thing that I'm adding on to as an advice to all the parents that I'm seeing. I don't know how that adds to, but I think that's a sensible thing to do. So
yeah, I think it works better more for adolescents because they are really lot of mental health issues in them also, thanks to confining at home.
So we start off with we end with one last question. What, according to the panelists, is the next promising modality of treatment in myopia progression? What do you think would come as a big change apart from atropine in conjunct or as an isolated modality of treatment? What, according to you, would be the...
I think the MyoSmart glasses, MyoSmart glasses probably will work. It's cheaper and no intervention, and we know how they work.
And Arvind, sir?
The same thing. I think that DIMS, if it is effective, I think it can even replace atropine and be a better option.
Don't say like that.
No. See, anything other than chemical is definitely better. No? I think you can do it in optical. This thing, it's always better. But I think probably the cost should come down. Otherwise, it may not be affordable for everybody.
Any other panelists have any other thoughts on the most promising modality for myopia progression, probably the next 1 year or 2 years down the line?
I do have a comment on that. So I don't know. I mean, as much as all the studies seem convincing about atropine, progressive lenses, and all that, we still see that there is an increasing trend in myopia, and probably none of them will be able to prevent it. So I think we should also be looking at modalities to prevent myopia, apart from myopia control, though our discussion is on myopia control. And I think the big answer would be lifestyle change. Okay, to prevent myopia, but that is probably out of question because not everyone will be able to bring it. But there are schools which have brought in such a change, wherein they have classrooms which are placed far apart from each other, wherein children have to walk. They have classrooms which are set up outside under a tree or something, wherein children can look outside. So I think education to the teachers and changing the whole school system itself may go a long way in preventing myopia or in preventing high myopes in future. So I think For me, that would be one important focus, apart from lenses and drops, of course.
That reminds me of a study which they had done, not very sure where they had the classroom walls made of glass. So they have enough adequate sunlight letting into. Then they looked at progression.
It didn't change.
So that was something that they could think of, if not sitting under a tree, at least made out of glass and let sunlight and stuff. Anybody else has any other thoughts? Dr. Shilpa or Chinmay? So either it is atropine or DIMS lenses, which would probably be a way forward in controlling the progression of myopia. Thanks to the wonderful panelists that has cleared lots of queries and lots of doubts of with regards to when do we start atropine, how do we monitor the patients, when do we stop them, do we have an alternative existing, if so, how, why, where do we start it? I think after this discussion, we will not have patients coming with astigmatism treated with atropine or no progression myopia, not documented progression coming with like a blanket treatment for atropine wouldn't be a thing that we would be seeing in our clinics henceforth. Thank you, Dr. Ellen sir and KOS and viewers for the opportunity. I hand it over to Dr. Ellen sir.
Thank you, Dr. Soumya. At the outset, KOS and BOS thank Dr. Sumita Agarkar madam, despite her busy schedule, for gracing this occasion. This is the first CME program for this year, and explaining the topic in such great detail and staying with us till the end to clear all our doubts. I also thank the panelists, Dr. Arun Samprati, Dr. Chinmay, Dr. Deepthi, Dr. Sumita, Dr. Shilpa for answering almost all the questions posed by Dr. Soumya and Dr. Basuraj Kadiwal. Many of you wouldn't know that Dr. Basuraj Kadiwal helped me in designing these topics, my co-MC scientific committee member. I thank him also. And it's always a custom in KOS and BOS that we finish on time. At 8:26, in fact, I'd forgotten, Dr. Soumya messaged me. Can I just take one question? That reminded me. Thank you, Dr. Soumya, for conducting it so well. I'd be failing in my duty if I do not thank the sponsors of this program, Sun Pharma, Mr. Raju, Mr. Dhananjay, and the technical team, Mr. Ankit and Mr. Hitendra. This is one of the first programs. The rest will continue. Thank you, panelists. We almost had the 200 plus, the attendees, almost 200 plus. I don't know the exact number. We will come to know later. Thanks. Without you, this wouldn't have been a success. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot, madam.
Thank you. Nice to see you,
Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Soumya, I meet, but you, I'm seeing you after a very long time.
Yes, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.